Evelyn Harrington was born to inherit a $1 million empire, but her rise to power sparked a jealousy so deep it turned deadly. Adrian Harrington, her overlooked and resentful cousin, watched her every step from the shadows, convinced the legacy she carried should have been his. When ambition collided with obsession, their family's legacy transformed into a chilling mystery, one that would expose dark secrets, tear apart a powerful dynasty, and end with a crime that shocked the entire city. Evelyn Harrington's life began in the world of polished marble floors, private tutors, and carefully guarded gates. As the only child of Charles and Helena Harrington, she was raised under the constant glow of expectation. Every corner of the grand Harrington estate reflected the family's triumph: oil paintings of stern ancestors, glass cases filled with awards, and hallways lined with photographs of business milestones. From a young age, Evelyn was taught that she would one day inherit not just a company, but an entire legacy built over generations. Her childhood was shaped by discipline, routine, and the unspoken pressure to be perfect. While other children enjoyed simple freedoms, Evelyn learned early how to present herself to the public. Charity galas, media appearances, and business gatherings became part of her normal life. Reporters adored her bright smile and calm presence, often calling her the most promising young leader of her generation. Employees respected her for her focus and steady ambition. She never raised her voice, never displayed frustration, and never allowed herself the luxury of vulnerability. To everyone watching, she seemed invincible, an example of elegance molded for greatness. But behind the estate's towering gates, Evelyn lived in a world of isolation. The constant attention left her little room for genuine friendships. Her success became both her shield and her cage. She spent long hours studying business strategies, reviewing market reports, and shadowing her father during critical meetings. Though she worked tirelessly to prove she was worthy of the empire, quiet doubt sometimes lingered in her mind. She wondered if people admired her for who she truly was or for the fortune she represented. Yet she moved forward with determination, unaware that the bright future carefully prepared for her would soon be threatened by forces she never imagined. Adrian Harrington had always existed in the background of the family's world, drifting between half-hearted jobs and failed investments. Unlike Evelyn, he had never been shaped for responsibility. His upbringing lacked structure, and his ambitions shifted constantly, leaving him without a clear path. The Harrington elders once believed he might mature into a worthy successor, but his repeated financial mistakes and reckless decisions gradually shut every door he hoped to enter. When the final inheritance plan excluded him entirely, he felt the humiliation settle deeply, becoming a quiet bitterness he never let go of. As Evelyn's achievements grew, Adrian watched with a mix of envy and disbelief. She attended executive briefings he was barred from, made decisions he was never trusted to handle, and received praise from investors who barely remembered his name. Each success she reached seemed to push him further into the shadows. He convinced himself that the empire had always belonged to him by right. He viewed the exclusion not as a consequence of his failures but as a personal betrayal that stripped him of his birthright. Over the years, that bitterness hardened. He began following every update about the company, memorizing new investments, mergers, and expansions. He studied Evelyn's schedule, observed her routines, and tracked the estate's operations with unusual interest. Though he pretended to have moved on, he quietly fed his resentment with each reminder of her position. His frustration transformed into an attachment that bordered on obsession, and his thoughts became consumed with regaining what he believed had been stolen. Family gatherings grew tense as Adrian's attitude shifted from distant to quietly hostile. He spoke little, but his eyes carried an intensity that unsettled even distant relatives. No one suspected the depth of his resentment or imagined how far it would eventually push him. Adrian's anger had taken root, and beneath the surface. In the months leading up to the tragedy, Evelyn sensed a subtle change in the atmosphere around her life. Small, almost insignificant incidents began to surface, each one easy to dismiss on its own, yet collectively unsettling. It started with misplaced documents, files she remembered organizing carefully, only to find them missing or rearranged the next day. Her assistants believed it was simple human error, but Evelyn felt a pattern forming, one she couldn't quite explain. Soon after, she noticed unfamiliar vehicles parked for extended periods near the entrances of the Harrington estate. They never stayed long enough to attract attention, yet always appeared at times when she was leaving or returning home. Security personnel checked the surroundings but found no reason for alarm. They suggested that the cars belonged to tourists or business visitors, but Evelyn couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that she was being watched. As pressure increased within the company, Evelyn stayed late in her office more frequently, reviewing financial records and expansion proposals. During one of these nights, she discovered unusual transactions buried deep within the accounting logs. Funds had been moved between dormant accounts without authorization, though nothing had been officially stolen. Internal auditors assured her it was likely a system error, but she sensed intentional interference. She began to wonder if someone was testing the company's vulnerabilities. Her personal life also grew strangely disrupted. Packages she never ordered arrived at her doorstep. Anonymous messages appeared in her inbox, containing vague warnings or odd statements with no sender information. While none of the messages were overtly threatening, their timing created a cloud of suspicion that followed her everywhere. Evelyn increased her security measures, changed her routines, and requested additional monitoring, yet the unease only grew stronger. The night the power went out began like any other long evening at the Harrington estate. Evelyn had stayed late in her study, working through documents related to a major international expansion. Outside, heavy clouds gathered, darkening the sky far earlier than usual. By the time she looked up from her work, rain was tapping sharply against the tall windows and distant thunder rolled across the property. The estate, normally bathed in warm lighting, felt unusually dim and silent under the weight of the approaching storm. As the wind strengthened, the lights suddenly flickered. Evelyn paused, expecting them to steady, but within seconds the entire mansion fell into complete darkness. The familiar hum of electricity vanished, replaced by the constant pounding of rain on the roof. The estate's backup generator, designed to activate instantly, remained silent. To Evelyn, it felt like more than just a mechanical failure, it felt intentional. She kept still, listening for any sign of movement within the vast halls around her. Unbeknownst to her, someone had already crossed the property boundaries before the blackout even occurred. The rain masked the sound of footsteps moving across the gravel paths. The intruder knew the estate's layout well enough to navigate the shadows with confidence. The storm served as perfect cover, hiding both the presence and intentions of the figure slipping through the darkness. Inside, Evelyn searched for her emergency flashlight, trying to steady her breathing. The sudden isolation unsettled her, especially after the strange events of recent months. The storm seemed to trap her inside the mansion, separating her from the outside world. Meanwhile, the intruder moved quietly through service corridors rarely used by staff at night. Every step brought them closer to Evelyn's study. The estate, grand and proud during the day, had transformed into a maze of shadows. Morning arrived slowly over the Harrington estate, casting a pale light over the rain-soaked grounds. Staff members entered through the side gate, expecting an ordinary workday after the stormy night. The silence greeting them felt heavier than usual, but no one imagined the true reason behind it. As they moved deeper into the mansion, they noticed the lights still off, the backup generator inactive, and several doors standing slightly ajar. A sense of unease spread among them, urging them to search for Evelyn. When they reached her study, the scene inside froze them in shock. Papers were scattered across the floor as if a struggle had disrupted her meticulous workspace. Her chair was overturned, several drawers forced open, and the security panel beside the door was destroyed. In the center of the chaos lay Evelyn, lifeless and still, her posture indicating she had been taken by surprise. The storm had concealed the tragedy for hours, leaving the estate eerily untouched since the intruder had vanished into the night. Authorities were called immediately, and within minutes, police surrounded the property. Investigators moved carefully through the mansion, documenting every detail. Broken locks, muddy footprints, and signs of tampering on the generator indicated a deliberate breach. Despite the disorder, nothing of monetary value appeared missing. Her jewelry, electronics, and confidential business files remained untouched. This single detail shifted the investigation from a robbery to something far more personal. News of Evelyn's death spread quickly across the city, shocking those who had admired her. She was seen as a rising leader destined to transform the Harrington Empire, not someone who would fall victim to such a violent end. Crowds gathered outside the estate gates, while news outlets reported the tragedy around the clock. The story of the young heiress who had everything, only to be taken so suddenly, gripped the public and raised countless questions. Detectives began their investigation by mapping every event of the stormy night, hoping to uncover a pattern that would reveal the intruder's identity. The first significant clue came from neighboring properties. Several homes along the estate's private road had security cameras that continued functioning through the blackout. When investigators reviewed the footage, they noticed a single vehicle traveling toward the Harrington estate hours before the power failure. The car did not reappear on the road afterward, suggesting it had taken an alternate exit or remained hidden on the property before slipping away unnoticed. The license plate was partially obscured by mud, but enhanced footage led police to a registered vehicle belonging to Evelyn Harrington. This discovery immediately shifted the direction of the investigation. Adrian had been on strained terms with the family for years, but his presence near the estate on the night of the tragedy raised serious suspicions. Detectives requested his phone records, financial logs, and recent transactions, uncovering a troubling pattern. Adrian had been moving money between private accounts, many linked to old business ventures that had long collapsed. Buried within these transactions were attempts to access dormant company accounts under the Harrington name. Investigators also examined the malfunctioning generator, the critical factor that allowed the intruder to move undetected. Technicians confirmed that the generator had been tampered with intentionally. Fingerprints found on the control box matched Adrian's. He had previously worked in a company department related to facility maintenance years earlier, giving him familiarity with estate operations and security backups. Each piece of evidence reinforced the investigators' growing conclusion: the blackout was not caused by the storm, but orchestrated to create the perfect window for the attack. When investigators finally confronted Adrian with the evidence, his confidence collapsed quickly. The surveillance footage, financial records, and forensic reports formed a chain too strong for him to break. What began as denial slowly unraveled into a confession shaped by desperation, resentment, and years of pent-up frustration. He admitted to studying Evelyn's routines for months, waiting for a moment when she would be alone and vulnerable. The storm gave him the cover he needed, and the blackout, caused by his own calculated interference, opened a path through the estate without alerting security systems. Adrian claimed he never intended for the situation to end in death. He insisted his goal had been to force control of the empire by threatening Evelyn into stepping down. However, investigators saw through his attempt to minimize the severity of his actions. His deliberate planning, technological interference, and careful escape all pointed to a far more purposeful crime. Every step had been executed to ensure that Evelyn would not survive the night. Even without his full acknowledgement, his actions revealed a clear intention to eliminate her as an obstacle. News of Adrian's arrest spread just as quickly as the news of Evelyn's death. The public reacted with disbelief that a family member, someone linked by blood, had orchestrated such a cold and calculated betrayal. Investors withdrew their support from the company almost immediately, shaken by the scandal and the brutality behind it. Long-standing partners distanced themselves, unwilling to be tied to a corporation now stained by internal greed and violence. Inside the Harrington circle, the consequences ran even deeper. The family's reputation, built over generations of business leadership, collapsed overnight. Board members resigned under pressure, shareholders demanded accountability, and the company's structure weakened to the point of irreversible damage. Without Evelyn, the one figure trusted to. Years after the tragedy, the once magnificent Harrington estate stands as a silent reminder of everything the family lost. Dust gathers across the grand hallways where celebrations once echoed. The gardens, once trimmed with perfect care, are now overgrown and wild, swallowing the paths where Evelyn used to walk during early mornings. The estate, once a symbol of strength and success, has become a monument to an empire destroyed by jealousy and betrayal. Visitors who pass by often stop to stare, wondering how a life so full of promise could end in such devastation. The company Evelyn was meant to lead never recovered from the scandal. With investors gone and leadership fractured, operations declined rapidly. Departments closed one by one, and longtime employees were forced to leave. The collapse of the Harrington empire was not explosive, it was slow, steady, and painful, mirroring the deep wound left by Evelyn's loss. Analysts continue to reference the downfall as an example of how internal conflict can break even the most powerful institutions. No financial misstep or market crisis caused the destruction, it was the result of a single act driven by greed. Evelyn herself became a symbol far beyond the family name. Documentaries, articles, and case studies focused on her life, her potential, and the chilling circumstances of her death. People admired her dedication and mourned the future she never got to build. Schools she funded still honor her through small memorial plaques, and communities she supported speak of her kindness and discipline. Her legacy continues through the impact she made rather than the wealth she was meant to inherit. Adrian's imprisonment closed the investigation, but it could not erase the lasting consequences of his actions. His betrayal fractured the family beyond repair, leaving relatives scattered and ashamed to be associated with the Harrington name. His motivations, though explained,